with Youth Day being tomorrow, the debate on who should legitimately claim ownership of the legacy of the 1976 student uprising still rages on here in South Africa. Should that honour go to the Black Consciousness Movement, the African National Congress, or the Pan-Africanist Congress? What role did any of these movements play in the 1976 student uprising? What about the centrality of the Soweto Student Representative Council and its evolution into the South African Youth Revolutionary Council? All these questions recently came under the spotlight at a seminar organised by UNISA's Department of History in collaboration with World Brigadier Bam Chair on Electoral Democracy in Africa. Now, joining us from Pretoria today is Dr. Thula Simpson. A very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Hello. Hello. Good morning.
And
Pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And then, in Johannesburg, we are joined by Professor Itumeleng Mosala, both part of a very lively debate until now. Very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Prof, let me start with you here in the studio with me in Johannesburg. More than 20 years now after democracy, why is the question around who should claim ownership of the 76 student uprising legacy, why is it important today?
Well, I think it is important because we need to just remember who it is that was the agency of struggle and liberation in the country in the years that led to the final collapse of apartheid and settler colonialism in our country. I think we tend to locate that answer in specific individual organizations, in my view, wrongly. Mm-hmm. It is the people of this country. The people of this country were the ones who bore the brunt of suffering and struggle throughout, going way back to colonialism, but particularly in the years of struggle. It is black people of South Africa who did that, and in particular in this case, it is the young people who finally got to a point where they were fearless in dealing with the system. And so the political organizations that were involved on behalf of the people and with the people. But it is not correct to try and get them to compete about. What I know, because I was there at the time, is that the Black Consciousness Movement was the primary motive force in the country. But even the Black Consciousness Movement has no individual claim to that. It is the people of our country who brought about justice and peace in the country.
Dr. Simpson in Pretoria, interesting remarks here from Professor Mosala. How do you view that, and what is your point of view?
I would tend to agree with the perspective that he's articulated there. No less than the ANC President Oliver Tambo himself, reflecting on the Soweto uprising in 1985 at the Karlsburg Conference in May. He said that the ANC's political and military structures at the time were in a stage where they were not in a position to actually lead the uprising or even to exploit it in the immediate aftermath. This was a process which was led by the situation on the ground that the students felt that they were facing with regards to the education question in a very combustible environment that Soweto was in the early months of 1976, with a whole lot of other social and economic problems encountering the population. And with regards to the legacy of the Soweto uprising, I think we need to remember that there are many legacies. Any great historical event, not just Soweto 76, but the Russian Revolution or the French Revolution, there's no one single legacy for people to claim as being their inheritance. There are multiple legacies which have a variety of different impacts, which different organizations can legitimately claim that they're the inheritors of. So I think that a pluralistic interpretation of June 1976 and of the legacies therefrom and of the organizations who've claimed aspects of that legacy, I think that that might be the way that we should look at this and any other great historical event, multiple legacies with various different owners.
And in a way, everyone contributed to the eventual victory, if there is such a thing, Professor. And maybe we should see it within that context. But this recent debate, what did you make of it, and what do you make of the outcomes from this debate?
Well, I think there's always an attempt by some people to distort history. And unfortunately, when we distort history, we distort history by excluding the real bearers of the struggle. And my point here this morning is that it is the black people of South Africa who are the legitimate owners of the struggle. The legacy belongs to the black people of South Africa. Now, the issue of which organization was involved is very clear. The facts are very clear. It is the Black Consciousness Movement of South Africa. It is Steve Biko, it's Mapetla Mohapi, Sonkgopo Tsetiro. We were the people who were pushing the struggle at that time. But my point is, it is not even us.
Yeah.
Even we can't claim to be the owners of this legacy. It is the people of South Africa who are the owners of this legacy. And it is wrong. Our organizations tend to distort.
Yeah.
And I think this is what is happening at the moment. There is an attempt to distort history.
Do you agree with this distortion, Dr. Simpson?
I think that the official ANC perspective, the reason why I quoted President Tambo and his reflection on this is that it was a verdict which the ANC at that time, I don't know whether, June 1976 has been remembered on an annual basis many times since then. Maybe leaders in the present day are saying different things, but the ANC was always very frank in acknowledging that this was a people's uprising. And if we look, when we speak about legacy, we're speaking about the aftermath of Soweto 1976. And I don't think there's any way of denying that a lot of the anger of the people who were involved in the uprising, it helped to reinforce the ANC's armed struggle, because people came to the conclusion that the solution that the ANC was offering, that the only way of confronting the system was to fight back with sophisticated weaponry. A lot of people left the country to join the ANC. A lot of people were inspired by the ANC's armed struggle. So when we speak about the legacy, I'm not saying that it only fed into the ANC, but a very important stream fed into the ANC-led liberation struggle in future years. And that reached its culmination. I mean, when you speak about the ANC winning the overwhelming majority of support of the black population in the '94 elections, that has to come from somewhere. And one of them is, even though they didn't organize the Soweto uprising, when we're speaking about the legacy of the Soweto uprising, the ANC is one of the major beneficiaries, and so they can't be written out of that history.
No, absolutely.
Tomorrow, let's escalate the discussion, because I think we agree on on the principle of the argument. But let's move on to the class of 2015. I want to talk to you, Professor, about activism today. Have we lost the legacy of activism amongst our youth? Are we more obsessed in the materialist kind of way? Are our young people more at risk because we are not active, because we are not as conscious as we should be?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think what has happened is that 1994 was actually bad for black people. What we did in 1994 is that we depoliticized our people. We created a culture of materialism that you're talking about, a culture of entitlement. We forgot that freedom is a political matter. Freedom is not a material matter. Freedom is a political matter. It's a cultural matter. And what has happened since then is that we have a state that purports to do things for people. And this is where we lost it. I think part of the problem with let me put it negatively, the non-black consciousness approach to things is that we tend to promise things to people. We fought a struggle in the Black Consciousness movement in the late 60s and 70s in which we said black people must stand up and do things for themselves. The greatest slogan that ever came out of that time was, "Black man, you are on your own." Now, what is happening now is that that activism has been killed. It's been killed by the kind of settlement and freedom that was given to people. You don't give freedom to people. People attain freedom. And that's where we are. We are at a point in which we are independent, we're not free.
Dr. Simpson, you've heard the premise of the merits of this discussion. I want to take it a little bit further around activism and maybe get your insight into the kind of campaigns we see these days. We've seen some at tertiary institutions. I'm not 100% convinced that they belong to the students of those institutions, but that's my personal opinion. How do you view this and where we are today?
Activism we can have a debate about, but interest, I think that the young generation is very interested in the questions that were raised inter alia by the generation of 1976, but not necessarily limited to that. I mean, one of the questions which the 76 generation were asking is, why do we have one curriculum in the townships and we have a different curriculum when we go to the suburbs? Why do we have an industrial education for the black poor children and we have a liberal arts education with a full diverse curriculum across the street if we go to the white suburb? And that debate is very much alive in the present day. I'm not going to divulge the content, obviously, of discussions which take place within tertiary institutions, but the question of who teaches, what the subject matter is, and what should be the criteria for success within the system, that is a subject, even if students are not in the streets protesting about it, it's something which they're extremely interested by. And if you want to enliven any tertiary institution, the students there, to the issues which are live there, speak about those subjects. And those are the subjects which have actually been raised by the students at many universities. And I think that that is part of the legacy of Soweto 1976. And when I speak about great events having legacies lasting into the long term, we need to remember that these, it can still be lost.
Yes, it can still be lost. I wanted to conclude today's discussion around young people and the legacy of the student uprising by giving you a number. Within the next 35 years, Africa's population will more than double, and more than half of that population will be under 18 years old. In your closing remarks, can you touch on what that means for the continent in light of a day like Youth Day, in light of the struggles that we face on the continent? I'll start with you, Prof.
Well, I think the situation is very dire on the continent. It's dire in our country as it is at the moment. That statistic is a very worrying statistic. I think that we all forget. I mean, I tend to myself think that I'm still the young person that I was in 1976. But we all forget that this country should actually be in the hands of our young people. But what is it that we're doing for them? We're doing nothing for our young people. This government is doing very little for young people. This government is not thinking about what is it? This government has betrayed the revolution that young people represented in 1976 in Soweto and other townships.
Thank you, Prof. Can you respond to that? I'm sure that the government would argue that, days like tomorrow, the future is much brighter for young people, the investment in education, health, and so forth. How do you view that?
I'm optimistic about the youth. As you can tell from my accent, for a large part of my youth, I was actually brought up in Britain. And I think that a lot of the young people that we've got in this country are capable of doing very great things. They're certainly doing great things within the university framework. The future is open for them. And Africa, it's the fastest growing continent in the world in terms of economic growth. And they're coming into a rich legacy. And if they can draw on the lessons of the past, I believe that Africa can potentially have a very great future. It's in the hands of the youth, and I think that there's no reason to be pessimistic about what they will make, about the opportunities which are there for them.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. That's Dr. Thula Simpson joining us from Pretoria. We're talking about the legacy of 1976. Who owns it? It's not really important who owns it. We all own it. It belongs to all of us here in South Africa. Some of us were even involved throughout the 80s and so forth. So it belongs to all South Africans who want to be part of it, isn't it so?
I agree, 100%. I agree, 100%.
Thank you very much. That is Professor Itumeleng Mosala joined us here in studio to talk about that Youth Day.